It's time once again for the Worship Ministry Catalyst Podcast.
Worship Ministry Catalyst is a resource for all worship leaders and team members serving in the local church.
So take a seat at the table and join the conversation as we discuss all things worship, from team dynamics to technology and song selection.
And now it's time for the show.
Good afternoon and welcome to Worship Ministry Catalyst episode 225, and the first episode being broadcast from our new sponsor, eCamp. Well, no, they're not sponsoring us. No.
Not
I'm Joe
sponsoring,
Brookhouse.
Yep.
No. And your long-lasting, happy to have you, generational worship leader. What's your name again?
David. Yeah.
David Linder.
Yeah. Yeah, so trying out eCam and see how it works for live streaming. It's supposed to be this awesome program, and we'll find out. I do have some sound effects again.
Oh.
So as important as
I
is.
was sad. I was sad that we didn't have those previously. Ooh, what is that one?
Triangle.
Oh, I thought it was just some kind of torture device. This reminds me vaguely of a certain Christmas show that we did, where somebody brought in sound effects.
Yeah, that's how you torture, children and young percussionists who really they get into band and orchestra and all that because they want to play the drums, and they start them off on the triangle.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you get to hit that triangle.
Yeah, until you just decide it isn't worth it anymore, and you'll just throw it all away for the sake of ding 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 ding
Right.
ding. Right?
Yep.
Like, I don't know, Mom. I thought I did it right, and they sent me packing. Well, I wanted to acknowledge what a great time that I had chatting with Brandon during the last episode.
A great guy.
And
to get to know him a little bit.
Yeah, I think we could have talked for hours. And I will say that, as I was thinking back on the things that really resonated with me when it came to that conversation, for me, one of those growing edges that really helped me get to a point of comfort and effectiveness, I think, from worship was when he spoke about making mistakes, that everybody makes them, and that how you navigate those and how you respond to those really is going to define a lot of how effective you are as a worship leader. I'm really paraphrasing terribly,
Right.
but it used to be, I put the capo in the wrong place, which I still do. I still do it all the time. That I would be so embarrassed that I really couldn't lead worship. I just stopped leading worship, and I just became so concerned about how I was being perceived. And that still happens every once in a while, but most of the time it's just like, oh, well, okay, let's stop for a second. Let's move the capo. Let's try that again. And just keep moving, because if I dwell on that, then I'm really creating a larger distraction than the initial mistake ever was. How about you?
Yeah, it's just life leadership in general. Still working at it, but just accepting failures as a part of the process. And in fact, mistakes, failures, any of those things, I don't know. I don't know that we actually can grow as humans without them. There's the we would hope, we would hope that we could go read a self-help book about whatever topic we're struggling with, and just easily implement it in our lives and add it in, and everything works out better because we read that book. But The truth is, we don't always learn things until we need to learn them, and sometimes we only need to learn things because we've made mistakes, and that's
right. Yeah.
what teaches us. Well, I'm not making that mistake again. you know.
Right. I think there are certain people, and I would say my wife is maybe one of them, that is able to internalize something without having to experience the pain of it.
Mm-hmm.
That if you told her, and people have heard me talk, I've said this about her before. If you told her, don't put your hand on the stove, it's hot, she'll say, oh, okay, cool. And if she knows you and trusts you, she's not going to make that mistake.
Right.
She doesn't need to make that mistake. I was actually thinking about this the other day. Is like lacrosse season has started for my son, and we go out and practice an hour and a half a night on certain things. And occasionally one of us will like throw the lacrosse ball down the street, and it's just like, whoa. But it's the fact that we're doing things so much that invariably something is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go, oh, okay, well, what just happened there? If you only do something 3 times and one of those 3 times it goes terribly wrong, you may not have the opportunity to learn from that mistake, or you may be so concerned about the fact that it happened that you don't even want to investigate it.
Right.
Yeah. I remember the first time I used in-ears and heard myself, and I went, oh, this is terrible. I am terrible. I don't ever want to hear myself sing again. And it really threw me off for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized later, I'm like, okay, I can tell my breath support's not what it needs to be. I'm not breathing very well.
Right.
I've developed some bad habits. And, being exposed to those failures really means, that you are growing.
Right. Yeah, and that's part of my daughter's actually starting to join us a little bit on worship team, and she's singing, and but she was in practice for the first couple of times of practice. She didn't use a monitor; she just was singing, and she could hear herself and was singing along with the what she was hearing in the house. And last time she sang, I gave her a monitor, and she used it. And this time, I was giving it back to her. Well, I asked her, I said, do you have your monitors in, have your earphones in? She said, no, and I don't really want it, don't really need it. It's like, well, but you need it. Like, it's important when you're leading worship that you can hear yourself, because you need to hear if you're singing on, in tune and in the right tempo and all that stuff. And so, and she says, well, I don't like hearing myself,
Mm-hmm.
like that. And
Mm-hmm.
but none of us do. I remember, now you and I have probably really gotten used to it because of so much podcasting, so much live streaming, so much of seeing and hearing yourself over and over and over again. You just kind of you adapt to it. But I remember as a kid, especially playing with a tape recorder, and, you record yourself and then you play it back, and like, I sound like that?
Right.
That can't possibly be me.
Yeah.
But then,
It's true.
Yeah. Then you start getting used to it. But like that was
A lot of times when I work with voiceover artists on things, they're like, well, how do you get used to your own voice? I'm like, not shying away from it. You really just have to get to the point where you hear yourself so much that you acclimate to it. And it stops being, why do I sound like that? And you just go like, oh, the other day I saw like a picture of myself taken from an angle that I find not to be particularly flattering. And I'd go, oh no. The thing is, that's what I look like. And that's what people are used to seeing. I'm just not used to seeing that.
right.
And that I'm not saying that's a failure, but just having that additional perspective that is not the perfect, filtered, perfectly framed kind of thing.
Right.
You go, okay, this is what people are used to from me. Maybe not what I want from me. Well, we kind of rabbit trailed a bit here, didn't we?
Yeah, but I remember for me, that's singing in tune has always been a challenge with in-ears, and I still haven't mastered it. I don't think there's something about about having a monitor, right in your ear. I don't know if it's like an allergy, because I thought for a long time it might be allergies, and because a doctor told me that my that tube from I think it's your eustacia tube or something like that, from your ear down to your throat.
Sure.
It was clogged or swollen or something, inflamed, and so stuff wasn't traveling through there like it was supposed to. But it's also, if you just think about it, physically, it's a tube that goes from your ears down right next to your vocal cords, which is a part of how you hear your own voice, right? You're hearing your own voice through that tube. And so, I don't know if it's because of that or just something abnormal about monitors, not having the right monitors. I don't know what it is, but that's still an imperfection. That's a mistake I make all the time, singing out of tune, using in-ear monitors. So, yeah, it was a good interview. It was good to get to know him, and also good to introduce people to him and what he has to offer. There's a lot of great tools there. Same thing is true for our interview for next time. I recorded just this morning with Alex and another guy. So Brandon was what was it, worship team training? I think that was, and then and Alex is worship ministry training. So, but he offers some tools and resources. He's got some great courses, for people like you, that were just kind of thrust into leading worship and maybe not trained. And it's designed around that idea. So that'll be another great episode for people to check out next week as well.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm sorry that I was unable to participate, but I'm glad that you are charging ahead with guests in my absence. So that's awesome.
Well, we can watch it together as when we air it next week. So.
Oh, all right. We could do an intro. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to chat about something that I saw on Facebook. It was a post from, if you don't mind me transitioning,
Nope, let's do it.
a friend of ours named Fred McKinnon, who's a worship leader, and he founded the worship community about 15 plus years ago. And he's been a friend of ours.
In my
Go ahead.
opinion, in my opinion, he's one of the I guess kind of fathers of kind of the new era of worship, networking, the worship, collecting, getting people together, and
Right. Yeah.
You've been kind of an exemplar for a lot of us for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I've met him and a couple of different times in person. It's just a solid guy, fun to spend time with, and really engaging. But he shared a post that I thought was sharing, and part of the reason I want to share it is we're hoping that we're able to schedule Fred to spend some time with us on the podcast at some point. But about a week and a half ago, he shared this post. I'm not going to read his whole post. I'm just going to read the little the screen capture that he shared. Because it's for somebody whose hair is gray like mine, I see this stuff and I go, oh man. So let me read it, and then let's chat a bit.
Yeah.
It's generated a lot of conversation. So I'm starting to quote now. Hey, worship leaders, advice is needed. So what do you do when people over 50 wants to join the worship team? I have been struggling with this for a while because I have been trying to keep a younger vibe for the team and musicians. I don't know. I don't want to turn people away that wants to serve. Maybe I can form a separate worship team for older singers. Help. Laugh out loud. Laughing, but I'm serious. And guys, try not to judge me. I haven't made any decisions yet. Just searching for advice and different ways to look at it. So I tried to read that accurate to what was written there, although there's some emojis and some other things going on there. But yeah, I saw that, and it really generated a lot of conversation from folks. There's been a discussion of kind of the necessity for being young and hip to be effective as a worship leader. This is not a new topic, but I will tell you, as somebody who is recently over 50, as less than a year ago, I thought that would bother me more than it actually does. And it actually just makes me feel a little sad, you know. And I'll just give you my 2 cents, and I'm definitely interested in your perspective, David. When I first became a worship leader, I was in my just approaching middle 30s. I didn't even know what a worship leader was, but then I got kind of thrust into it. And it was important to me at that time to be perceived as a younger, cooler person. And I tried to wear the clothes that I saw other cool worship leaders wearing, and to try to, how does your hair? I grew a little under the lip thing, I mean, I really was just like,
I had one of those.
Yeah, I wanted to be perceived in a certain way. And so the sadness that I feel is reflecting back to that time where my heart for worship wasn't really probably where it should have been. And so reading this doesn't make me, I don't feel insulted. I ain't going to get younger. My ministry has its place. But it makes me sad that we haven't grown in some ways beyond that. Hey, we need to be young and hip kind of component. And yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts? Just kind of in general, I'm curious.
Well, listeners, anyone who's listened for a while and or read the blog, articles I've written on the blog about it, over the years, knows I regret the role I played in trying to push, modern worship to be focused entirely on, modern and relevance, and doing what we thought was necessary to try to reach, people outside the church, when the truth was we were never going to reach people outside the church with worship music, because it's
right.
worship music and we're worshiping God. It's not, there's nothing about it that's designed to reach the non-believer. It's for the believer. So, I regret any role that I played in that, but at the same time, I really resonate with the sentiment, with the sentiment that, well, if you're, it's really hard if that's your focus, if that's the important thing to you, is that you're trying to be hip and modern and relevant, then yeah, you're going to be kind of ageist, because you want to present that to the world, right? You don't want to have a whole bunch of older people with gray hair and a vibrato that spans about a fourth or a fifth, and trying to sing
yeah,
Ren Collective or something. It's not going to work. it's going to sound wrong.
right.
If that's your whole focus. But see, now, I got fired from the last church I was worship pastor at. I got fired for not being basically the same thing, not being relevant enough, hip enough, not enough like popular, trendy worship leaders. And so I wasn't necessarily fired for being too old. But that's almost the message that was kind of communicated, is that it's and so, but see, what I think, what I'm wrestling with is, and I mentioned this to you before, is we've in the church built on the teaching of Scripture, which is all about discipleship and mentoring and bringing up generation after generation after generation in the way of God. I would think the church would be the exception to that rule, where we're not going to be so focused on being trendy and keeping up with culture that we're going to actually discard of the people who have the most to offer when it comes to training up the next generation. Yeah, our style, my style, my musical style, my singing style isn't nearly as cool as some of the other guys that are around. But I do have a lot of experience. I do have a lot of time behind the keyboard, a lot of time behind the microphone, a lot of time with teams, where I probably still have something to offer from a mentoring. I just threw stuff on my floor. Mentoring leadership perspective, if people can get past the outward appearance of not being hip and trendy.
It's I think it's tough not to personalize something like this, and and I think that's a big piece of it. One of the comments that I thought was useful in the thread was, and it was really something that Fred himself brought up, was the idea that if you have founded a ministry whose intention is to reach a certain segment, then it is not inappropriate that the demographic of your leadership would reflect that. And as an example, he didn't provide this, but if you are ministering, let's say, to a senior facility, showing up with skinny jeans and a tight T-shirt, and playing really loud music is probably not going to resonate the way that you would want it to. And I think similarly, if you're trying to reach a younger demographic, it may be harder to reach them with somebody who looks like me. That may or may not be true, but really, what the thing that you said to me that is as important as anything is, we need to be very careful that we have established these levels of mentorship, and that we're not abandoning a generation that can really shepherd the next generation. And that's why Gabriel Allred, who's part of the team, is such a great mentor. Is he's got a worship team, and some of the younger people are just getting out of their teens and coming into their 20s. And I don't know how old he is. I think he's in his 40s. But he's providing this guidance, but he doesn't have to be the guy in front. And they've established a culture in their church that, hey, I'm going to walk alongside you. I'm going to build you up. In the same way, like pastors, you're going to have a senior pastor, but you really want your teaching pastors, to develop this cadre of teaching pastors that can speak to people in different ways, but still have that really solid foundation. And I think what many of us read initially in that post was a rejection of people over a certain age. And you could almost reframe that. How do you deal with people who can't sing on key? Who are tone deaf, or whose voice just doesn't have a voice. I mean, it's kind of, what is the criteria for your worship team where you would suggest that a person doesn't have the gifts to participate? But this is very surface level.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting, and not to discredit what you said, but it's interesting that we think of somebody in their 40s as being, an older, wiser person.
I know. You're in your 40s, and clearly not.
I'm clearly not. Clearly. I mean, that's obvious by this point, right?
Yeah.
But there's just almost no space for that teaching. Our church up in Longview, they kind of have kind of a cool thing going on. At least I think it's cool from the outside. I'm not sure if it's still this way, but while I was there, we had my senior pastor, but they had the senior pastor emeritus, and he was still around, and he would still come to staff meetings from time to time, and he would preach once in a while. And he was just, supportive of what was happening at the church, encouraging. He didn't do anything to throw his weight around and try to change the direction that the current senior pastor was trying to do things. He was just there as a resource for the church, and then that senior pastor did the same thing. So for a while, the next pastor they hired was about my age, but for a while that pastor had two senior pastor emeritus at their church, at his church, just there to support and encourage and help, carry some of the load of shepherding the people and that kind of thing, but also to be an encouragement and a resource to him as he got his feet wet in this church, an established church. And that's a lot more the norm, I think, how it should be. But that almost never happens in churches. A lot of churches will have a what's it called? A transition plan, a strategy.
Right.
Yeah, starts with an S, but I can't think of the word. What's the word?
I know what you're trying to say,
Yeah.
and it's escaping me to succession plan.
Succession, maybe.
Yeah, not succession. That would be leaving. Succession. Yeah.
But so the old pastor's retiring, and they're going to bring a new guy on, and for a couple years they're going to kind of do this slow fade and handoff thing. But then a lot of times, once that's over, Dan actually just got the word for us. Succession plan. Thanks, Dan. So
is Dan on there?
yeah, I just got a comment.
Hey,
from
dude.
him, so
Why aren't you working?
so we now I've got all this. It's the first time I've seen a comment come up in this new new platform. So now I'm all excited. We have a comment. How do I show it on the screen? I don't know. That's one of the other things. You're supposed to be able to show a comment on the screen when it comes in. But there we go. Yeah, I did it.
Oh, I'm not seeing it, but that's okay. That's because it's too small for me. Oh, yeah. Now I saw it. Okay.
There it says, keeping an eye on the boss. Anyway, but after they finished up their succession plan, the guys are gone, right? I mean, they go off and retire, and they're out. They leave the church, and then and I think a lot of that's with a good intention, a good heart. They don't want to be around to create any problems for the new guy.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that pastor, especially if he was there for 30 years or something like that, he has a lot that he can offer the younger pastor, and I think that's a missed opportunity. And I've been really railing on this, in my personal blog and at our church. Like, we've just been so focused on, like, I was using the illustration of magnets. We're trying to marry two opposing ideas with the secular individualistic pursuit of culture and the corporate die to yourself, culture of Christianity. They're not just oil and water. They're actually opposed to one another. Like, you can't bring individualism and secular individualism into the church and expect the church to still be the church like we want the church to be, because everyone's just making everything about what they want. It's all personal, preferential stuff that you want when it comes to style of worship and programs and things that the church offers, and it's like it's exactly upside down, backwards thinking from how the church is supposed to be. So if there's any organization on the planet that should embrace older, wiser people in all facets of ministry, then it should be the church, right? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Well, we could get deep into Christian culture, couldn't we?
Right.
You're talking about the things that the church should be, and how to be relevant, how to connect with people where they are in a way that isn't pandering.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be an invitation, and also a standard. They do seem counter to each other. My wife would call that the dialectic. The two things that are seemingly in opposition of each other existing at the same time. Mm-hmm. The idea that you want to be attractive, you want to present something attractive to somebody who is a non-believer. But what is the thing that you are presenting that should be attractive? I think that gets to it. To me, I think the more indoctrinated I get, the more I feel like what I should be making attractive is the life that I lead and the way that I engage with people. That's not, hey, Joe listens to great music or Joe plays great music. I hope that there was a couple new people at church on Sunday, and as I saw them, my hope was, I hope they see what I'm doing here as authentic. that what they get from me, whether or not you like the songs, whether or not you like the way I perform, that you know, but that you know that I care. I care about you. I care about who you are. I care that you're here.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's so much more important than the style of music,
Right.
or the way I dress.
Well,
That if somebody listens to you as I interrupt you,
Oh, I was interrupting you, so
it's ironic. No, if somebody when somebody takes the time to listen to you, you lean into them. And if somebody is talking at you and doesn't give you space, as I'm doing to you now, there's a tendency to withdraw.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's more important than how old you are and the style that you present. But you go ahead, and I'll make space.
Well, no. So John Maxwell has this quote. He says, "What's rewarded gets repeated." I think it's Maxwell. I know Andy Stanley says the same thing too. But one of what we some of the way that we reward things in the church is just by what we put up in front of people, right? I mean, just by giving somebody or something stage time, or putting a worship leader up front, that's a bit of a reward in and of itself. It's a celebration, it's an affirmation, it's a saying that this is what we support as a church by putting that up there. So if everything that we put in front of people is always individualistically minded and trying to be preferential and hit people where they with their preferences, then that's the behavior that's going to be continually repeated. But if we start to reward, if we start to put up in front of people on a regular basis the important things, like what you're talking about, being a listener, being somebody who's selfless, who's invested in relationship, being somebody who's more interested in serving the rest of the body than getting their own needs met, somebody that's more interested in discipleship and mentorship than in modern trends. If we celebrate those things, if we reward those things in front of people, then those will have a much better shot at becoming the standard. But right now, what we reward is what we're seeing and what Fred was talking about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great way to put it. And maybe as a corollary, that if you present something unattractive enough times, people will believe, and you tell people that it is attractive, that it is worthy, that it will become so. And I say that as a consumer of Christian art, that when I play Christian music for my wife, with some very rare exceptions, she can get 5 seconds in and go, "That's a Christian song." Because the way the quality of the production, the whatever. But I can tell you that I've listened to enough of it that every once in a while I'll listen to a secular song and go, "Wow, that is so good." It'll almost bring me to tears that it's so good. And I'll realize, when's the last time a song that was presented to you, a worship song or on Christian radio, was so good and so unique or whatever that you just went, "Well, that was amazing." And I worry culturally that we are telling people what is worthy of consuming. But that's a completely separate topic. Coming back, you did a great job of bringing us back to Fred's post, and I completely went back off the trail there. I guess just to kind of wrap it up, because I'll have to end my time on the podcast here shortly for today. That I think we need to be careful when somebody asks a question like that, not to project our assumption of what their intention is. Mm-hmm. To ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? Give them the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. And then maybe the opportunity is there for you to be the mentor rather than somebody who immediately takes offense and then goes on the offense. If we do want people to grow, we have to give them space to do that. And I hope by giving them the space to grow, that they'll take that opportunity. Maybe there's an opportunity we hadn't really considered there before.
Yeah, yeah. Just wanted to mention Dan's comment. He says, lingering as a formal leader can be difficult if there isn't a spirit of humility. It's possible, but not all personalities are wired for letting go, which I would say is very true. There are definitely some leaders that wouldn't want to let go, that might make a transition kind of difficult. And at the same time, while I've been hard, or maybe we've been hard, probably mostly me, on not embracing the younger generation, or not. I've been hard on not just making everything about the younger generation. There is also some blame to be shouldered by our older generation who didn't seek to raise up the next generation, 30, 40, 50 years ago. When with the older generation, and churches still exist to this day that are still fighting for their own preference. So same thing we're talking about, just a different style. Right. But, they're still fighting for hymns and choirs and piano and organ and all that stuff. And I love all that. I love that style of music, love that style of worship. But they weren't able to be able to see that, if we want to have an influence and have an impact on what's coming, we're going to have to let some of our own preferences die so that we can let the preferences of the next generation, who are theoretically less mature, more spiritually immature. So they might need their preferences a little bit more than an older generation, but an older generation should be spiritually mature enough to worship no matter what style, no matter what form of worship, and they can say, I can worship to anything. You might need the style a little more than I do, so we're gonna give you the style you need, so that we can help you learn how to worship in spite of style. And they lost that opportunity by fighting for what they wanted. So there's definitely blame to be passed around to everybody, including me.
Yeah, I think there's some rigidity and a lack of adaptability that has kind of made it that I think is part of the generation that came just before us. We navigated that to a certain extent, and I think that, speaking for myself, but also for worship leaders around my age, that we are maybe more open and adaptable and less rigid than the generation before us.
Right.
And the newer generations may have learned to be rigid from people like us as we fought those cultural battles. And so there's an opportunity to find balance in there. And I really, Dan, appreciate the comment, because it was something that's on my mind too. Yeah. Transitions are hard, especially if you're on the way out or trying to come out from underneath the shadow of somebody who's on the way out. Those are hard.
Right.
Well, I have an appointment in 5 minutes, so I hate to cut this short because I'm enjoying it, but any other comments or conversation bits that we need to share before we wrap up?
Nope, that's good. Look forward to having Fred on the podcast soon. We were supposed to have Christy on this episode, but she had a family emergency, so she had to reschedule for later in the year. So sometime in June, we'll get Christy Stills on, get Fred on, and then be looking next week for Alex. That would be Monday, May 2nd, where you can catch that interview with Alex of Worship Ministry Training. So lots of good stuff coming.
All right. This has been good. Thank you all. Episode 225 coming to a close. We will see you in a couple of weeks. Blessings to you.
Thanks for joining us once again on the Worship Ministry Catalyst podcast.
And make sure to add your voice to the conversation. You can find us at twitter.com/WMCatalyst.
On Facebook at facebook.com/Worship Ministry Catalyst.
Or head over to worshipministrycatalyst.com and drop us a note.